And one of the best mentors I ever had was my station captain as a rookie firefighter. I'll never forget. He sat me down in one of my evals, one of my best evals I ever got, and one of the worst evals I ever got.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he said, Kelly, he said, you're a mediocre firefighter at best.
Damn. All
yeah,
right.
Thanks. Kick in the shorts. He said, but you do what you do well, extremely well.
Huh.
And I said, okay, I'm digging this. He says, you interact with the people so well. When it comes to EMT, you may not be able to remember your medications, but you hold the patient's hand. You comfort them. You give them something that they can't give.
Well, kick us off. Brian Kelly from East Coast Kelly's, fire marshal in Eastern North Carolina, avid first responder, and business owner, entrepreneur extraordinaire. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. What a unique kind of thing. I never thought a COVID hobby would turn into a side business, but that's kind of what has happened as I approached my quasi midlife crisis of my 40th birthday. And I was sitting around not doing all the normal things that firefighters do, like teach fire classes and do all this other stuff, right? Because we're all shut down in COVID. I started watching barbecue TikTok. And so
also not a normal thing for a 40-year-old to be doing. So congrats for staying young. I love it.
Yeah. So and I started watching it, and in every fire role that I've had, I've always been the PIO. So I'm always the guy in front of the camera.
There you go. Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I could totally do this. This would be fun. And so I started to do it, and then I started gaining followers, and then I started going live. And so companies literally started reaching out to me. Hey, can we send you these products? You have a great opportunity to sell our product. And be a face. So I was like, hey, babe, like they're helping me with my hobby. I don't have to dip into my little savings account anymore. That's awesome. Literally, that's kind of how the brand came about. I own another company that's East Coast Kelly's is DBA. Of Kelly Fire and Emergency Services Consulting.
Really?
So I go in and do HAZCOM training. We have people who do defensive driving, CPR and first aid and everything. And so, it's all about being diverse, right? You know that better than anybody. I've worked in, the public sector for so long, but I'm beginning to learn to just don't put all your eggs in one basket per se. So as this social media platform and, gave me an opportunity to kind of just dive into that. I wasn't teaching classes or doing consulting work with that. So I was like, well, look, why not we give this a try? And so it's kind of taken off.
What do you consider, like, if I know nothing about what you do, what does the business of East Coast Kelly's do? Or like, what's the premise?
Well, so we kind of indirectly imagine turning on Food Network, right? You turn on Food Network to be entertained and or to get ideas for recipes and different things. So my platform really is on the griddle. I use those cold rolled steel griddles. There's lots of different brands. I use a Blackstone. I don't get paid by Blackstone. It was just the one I wanted. I wish they did. If they're listening, that would be great. But literally, that's what I do. And so I wanted to show, and if you read some of my taglines on all my socials, it'll say the good, the bad, and the real of cooking outdoors. And so I wanted to show the humanistic piece of it, right? We're all into reality TV. And so I wanted to show people that it's okay to mess up. It's not like on Food Network, right?
Oh, interesting. So this isn't like a highly edited, this is like you raw at the Blackstone cooking away.
I got an iPhone, dude. Like I'm just living it up on that. And so companies have realized that it's okay, right? Just like when you walk into a department store and you see the model that's not absolutely the perfect shape, you're going to see my food that it's okay. Like how many times have you seen somebody cook something and they put it on social media and like, that was a fail, right? Like it's okay to say, this is what works. This is what doesn't work. And this is kind of what we need. So the beauty of that is that company still wants me to use their product. So the model of East Coast Kelly's is, either we do a product review and you pay us to do that product review and give feedback. And in full transparency, I'll review it. You may not want me to put it out there, but you're still going to pay me to review it. And then the other part of that is we make monetization off of ads on Reels on all the platforms, right?
So you're like truly a social media influencer. Like that's kind of the thing in the food space, fire service space. Like that's the business.
Yeah. And so in the fire service world, we have really become very close to fire service food based brands. That was a tongue twister. But you look at people like Unkies, which you've had on your show. He was
I
one of
just
the
had 2 kids too. Congrats to Unky if you're listening.
Madison and Monroe. And
That's
so
awesome.
both of those times, it was about reaching out to folks that are in the fire service and specifically in the food industry, small business.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened. So Adam reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I really would like for you to review this product for me and use it on your social media. I'm
No,
going to
I
send
didn't
you
know
some."
that was the connection.
Yeah. So he's like, "Hey, would you be willing to try it?" And I said, "Sure." And I'm just getting started. So at this point, it was just about giving me product, right? It was like
Sure.
a
Just something
junkie.
to do. Like I need content.
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
great
It was like
idea for
supporting a
content.
junkie, right? Like give me a little bit of my crack. So,
That's awesome.
I was doing it and it really wasn't about making money or anything like that. It was just about supporting the hobby. And so
Interesting.
it has manifested into that. Other companies saw the exposure, the thousands of views that we're able to get them, and they're like, "Hey, we want in on that." And so the fire service connection is whether it's first in last out coffee, which just literally sent me a package this week,
That's
or whether
awesome.
it's Unkies. There's lots of different brands that I connect with in the fire service. So the beauty of it was really just about connecting with those small businesses. We've got a local mom and pop food market who was a guy I work with, who they have a farmer's market that tags along on the way to the beach here in Eastern North Carolina, that we work with them on it. And we're even trying to connect those people. So small business with
Oh,
other
so you can
small
kind of build a
businesses.
network of like,
Yeah.
hey, this business could use this connection, whatever, and you kind of
Yeah, and I don't think people realize that. The fire marshal's office and working in prevention has taught me that relationships matter more than anything, right? Like I was
yeah,
telling one of my employees today, you can go in and do an inspection, and for that moment in time, everything is fine. But as soon as you leave, it's going to go right back the way it was, unless you truly change a behavior, which
yeah,
is what our intentions is, right? Like we all want to lay our head down at night and know that we changed something, that we made a difference that day.
yeah.
And so in the fire marshal's office, it's a joke. It's a running joke that we could wear a shirt that says "I saved your life today," and neither one of us knew it. Right? Like it's one of those things because we go to work and we never know about the lives that we save, and so
That's a good point.
that's kind of the connection with it. And so for this social media, sometimes it's not about making the dollar as much as it is about making the difference. And
Interesting.
so for me, that's what it is. Whether I'm going and selling Unkies to another firefighter in a shop
Yeah,
and getting some B-roll, right? And putting some
sure.
content out there, then that works.
That's awesome. Are you are you a videographer, a media person? But I guess your PIO role maybe has gotten you familiar with media, but what's
Oh,
that
I don't
connection
even
like?
own a camera, dude. Like I literally, it's like a hobby to me. And so I've picked up little nuggets here and there.
Sure.
I've spent, COVID really helped me learn what I liked seeing. And if I
Hmm.
liked seeing, I tried to, replicate it. But I've also, again, that's the real part of this, the good, the bad, the real of our channel, because we want to make sure that we understand that it may not be appealing to you, right? Like lighting
Sure.
matters, and we're learning. And I look at the people that you have on your staff, and I watch y'all's videos, and I go, my gosh, it's like I aspire to be to that level. And maybe
That's
it's
really
just
humbling
me
to hear.
holding myself
Thanks. I
to a
appreciate
different
that.
standard.
Yeah,
But
it's interesting though. I mean, it's a different type of content. So I think that, your audience engages with the authenticity. And it's funny. So
sure.
our marketing director always kills me. She's like, the authenticity is you don't have to have super highly produced perfect content every time. And I'm like, but I love that stuff. And she's like, I know, but your audience just loves just get in front of the camera and tell a story.
Yeah. That's all people want to see, right? Like they're looking at, like I was talking today, I'm like, I really need to replace my camera. And guy was showing me his 14. He's like, it's cinematic mode. And I'm like, that would be amazing. I mean, imagine a smash burger in cinematic mode. And then I was like, so how are people watching it? He's like, it's in 1080. And so for the people that don't know what that means, it's like you're paying for technology that no one's ever going to see.
Well,
Right.
it's funny. Like I tell people our content is consumed on the toilet at the firehouse. Like they're reading our catalogs and stuff. So
Yeah.
like bathroom humor is actually okay. And like, it's funny to be, cause like, that's literally where the guys are reading our stuff. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, really? I'm like, yeah, you got to know where the audience is. Like, I don't need the most, now I love the most highly produced stuff, but you don't
Sure.
necessarily need it because the environment in which people consume is it different for every brand.
Well, I would think that if we didn't have ownership, right, like you and I as the leaders of our corporation to strive for that, then we wouldn't care about the output of the product either, right? Like
True.
so it's very, very important for us to have that level of desire. It's also I'll speak for myself, it's my type A personality. right? Like I have that type A personality where I want it to be the best that it can be. It's
Yeah,
part of the reason why I have rosemary and basil and parsley now growing out in my yard. I haven't had a garden in forever, but it's an unlimited supply of garnish that looks phenomenal in the videos that I make. And
that's
so if I
awesome.
don't like it, I don't have to go to the store. I literally go out to the backyard, but it's extra time that I have to put in that I wouldn't have normally done.
That's so cool. Well, tell me about your audience. Who is the primary interactor with the East Coast Kelly's social channels?
Oh man, it's everywhere. It is the dad, it is the mom, it is the grandma, it is the grandpa. I can tell you what it's not. It's not the
Huh?
teenager, right? Like it is
Really?
it is not when I look at the
It's
analytics.
someone who has to cook, huh?
Yeah, but it is definitely somebody who has to cook, and it is that middle age, so from around 25, 30-ish to the 65-year-old, right? Because that's who's on
Interesting.
social media, and that's the reason why we're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So we
Interesting.
literally, I don't want to say simulcast, that's not true, but like we literally post on all those different platforms. I
Yeah.
am not posting on LinkedIn my food content because that's not
Hmm.
relevant there. It's not a good ROI.
Interesting.
There I'm growing a brand for my consulting firm, right? Like as I look at how things integrate AI, right? AI for up to this point has not been something that has changed, but not as many people need the consulting services because if they want a policy on
And you
XYZ123,
just tell it,
they just
hey,
ask their phone, right?
yeah.
So the way that things look and the way that I market myself for the consulting services, I call it the boring side of my business, right? Like it's not as cool. I'm sure it's like the design, right? Like you love showing the product,
Oh yeah.
but the engineering and the design. So that
It's
part
the
of
hard
it
part.
is the part that I'm having to remarket.
Yeah. Interesting. What is it that, like, when you think about your career in public safety, and I want to hear more about kind of how you got started in this, what is
Sure.
it that prepared you to be in this, like, new, I mean, like, you're talking about different types of content for different platforms. Like this, that is not a normal thing that folks, honestly, public safety generally is not so tech friendly that they think through the concept of multimedia creation and distribution and which platform, LinkedIn versus social. Like, what was your career upbringing like that kind of prepared you for this stuff?
Wow. So that's a loaded question. So I will say the desire before I get into the fire service background, let me say that we all have the desire to get it right? Like in the fire
Yeah.
service, we always, I don't care if you're the rookie catching the hydrant or you're the captain who doesn't want to go back on the rekindle, right? You're the one who wants to
Yeah.
get it right. You're driven by that. You want to be the best, the fastest, the quickest in everything that you do. So for me, it was that type A personality of getting it right.
Hmm.
Failure is not an option. So if I'm putting myself out there,
Mm.
it's my credibility, it's my legacy, if you will, right? Like it's who I am. And that matters. So how did I get started? I literally in the late 80s watched my next door neighbor's house across the street burn,
Oh wow.
and it was
How old were you?
probably 8 or 9 at the time.
Oh wow. So impactful. You were a kid.
Yes, very much so. And so if you backtrack even more, my dad and all of the people on my mom's side of the family was all part of a department called Ogden Rescue Squad in New Hanover County. And so they were some of the first in the state. I've got my dad's patches
No
of
way.
where he was with Ogden Rescue Squad and did American Red Cross first aid before EMT Basic was even a thing in the state.
Oh wow. So
Yeah,
your
very,
family's
very
been around it, and
yeah, well, and then it kind of just dropped off. Like everyone walked away from it. There was no stories of it. None of that. Like my dad got into sales, and literally, if I was to tell you, like there is a sales component to every one of our family members at some point in our life. My grandfather sold furniture for 30 some years. Um, my dad sold cars for 30 some years. My brother sells real estate today. I sell like life safety, right? Like, I mean, I'm you don't want to buy it, but I'm selling it, right? You came to buy a Yugo and I'm trying to sell you a Cadillac when it comes to safety. So,
yeah,
and then, I have two sisters and one sells and the other one has had a history in sales.
interesting.
So all of that coupled with really my plan was to actually be an ag teacher. I had no
Really,
desire. I know, like this is crazy, right?
be an
So in
ag.
high
You turn
school,
out to be a fireman and a cooking expert, and you end up wanting to be an ag teacher back in the
I
day.
know, right? Like so, and I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't have any of that stuff, but I had a really impactful teachers in high school that made a real big impact on my life. I
Hmm.
didn't have a whole lot of influences in adults at that time. It was a lot of peer influences. Not that I was screwed up. I had a very strong foundation in church and youth group at that time. But I had, when it came to family life, it was not that great. That's why our tagline is faith, family, and food.
Huh.
And so for me, it goes back to I had plans to go to NC State, major in horticulture. I wanted to be a teacher, right? Like that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach like nursery plants. Like if you went and bought stuff from Lowe's,
Yeah.
that's the stuff that I wanted to be able to teach other people how to do. So it really wasn't about being a farmer. It was more about teaching agricultural education because
Yeah.
of the impact that it had on my life. But I was very good friends with a guy who was in the same program who volunteered. See how the
As
connection
a
happens?
fireman. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he would go down to the firehouse and we would hang out, and I would see him leave on a call. And so I was like, man, that looks pretty cool. Like, I really wish I was doing that. So
Yeah.
I ended up joining my senior year in high school. Did not go to NC State, did not major in horticulture. It became too much money. And so I get a job of all things selling office supplies,
No
right?
way.
Like delivering and selling office supplies while I'm paying myself to go through the community college. Failed at it, was miserable at it.
Really?
Like could not get a D if I paid them kind of thing. Because again, I had no structure to speak of. And
Sure.
it's really, I believe it's not what God intended me to do. So, but I was taking these fire classes. Another friend of mine said, hey, let's go to these fire classes at night. So unlike an academy, I've listened to your podcast. I, like you, went, 2 nights a week,
Oh yeah.
Saturdays.
I was in
And that's,
Willington when I was doing this. So I
yeah.
mean,
And I'm here in Onslow County. There is no academy,
yeah.
and this is what I'm doing. And so I get my certifications. And I literally told my dad, I said, look, if I don't get this job at the fire department, I'm moving to Charlotte. He had moved to Charlotte and he wanted to open up this used car dealership. And I was like, I'll sell cars, right? Like this is
Yeah.
my path. God had different plans. I met my wife. She was, I was taking my dry cleaning in, my shirts and my ties for the office supply dealership. And she was a pretty lady behind the counter. And like I said, it just kind of worked out.
That's
July
so funny.
22nd, 2002, I was lucky enough to get hired, and I've enjoyed it ever since.
As a
So
firefighter, or where were you hired to do that?
yeah, I was hired at the city here to be a firefighter. I rode in the back of the truck. It's pretty cool. My fire chief now and one of the deputy chiefs is myself. We were all in the same unit, in the same rig together, and
That's
and so
cool.
we've kind of made our way up. I did spend 7 years as county fire marshal, and I'll tell you that was the most rewarding and most exhausting part of my career that I have ever had.
Interesting.
And I just did it for the sake of experience, right?
Yeah.
But during that time, I was the only guy that covered 24 stations. My family was extremely young at that time. When I left the city to go to the county, my son was 5, and when I came back, he was 12.
Oh wow.
And so it was extremely, extremely difficult at that time. So I go back for the sake of spending time with family, which is again faith, family, and food.
That's awesome. I want to
Yeah.
unpack a little bit of this. I heard you mention it, but I want to hear more about it. So your neighbor's house burned down when you were 9 or 10. What did
Yeah.
that have a big impact on your interest in the fire service? Or was it like, oh, my family's done this, my dad's done this, I see this? Just reflect a little bit on that.
I think that event caused me to go back and try to figure out the why, right? Like by nature, I'm a whyer. I want to know the why. I want to try to fix the why. I want to try to make things better. The fire service, we all do, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we want to go to Jobtown or not, we want to leave, right? And we want to know that we fix things.
Yep.
Whether it's on an EMS call or whether it's on the fire call. We put it out. We may have burned it to the ground, but by God, when we leave, it will
That
be
foundation's
out, right?
not on fire anymore, baby.
Exactly. I mean, the cops can't say that, right? Like the bad guy does get away every now and again.
That's a good point.
There you go. But we will leave and it will be out. It may take 7 days, but it's going to be out. So anyways, going back to that 9-year-old, it wasn't in that moment. Like, I mean, we did 4-H fire safety. The county fire marshal did that. It was a 4-H fire safety bowl. We competed as volunteers. And so when I got the role of joining the volunteer fire department, and I had this niche because I was the teacher, right? Like in high school, I was going off to be school to be the teacher. So it was like, Chief, Kelly, how about you teach these kids fire safety for me? Okay, I got it. I can do that. So I went back to that place of 4-H fire safety. I went back to the place of watching my peers lose everything from something that could have been prevented.
So these were kids you knew and like people that were
Oh yeah, like we hung out. Like it was one of those
Oh
things
yeah.
where they were across the street, and we hung out together. And I mean, we lived in a very, I won't say poor area, but it wasn't like it was a up and coming snooty snoot. Hey, you don't talk to nobody. We're going to go hang out with whatever. I mean, it was literally country roads, and you had one set of friends because it was farmland around it,
Yeah,
and that
that's
was
who
the
was
people that you
close.
hung out with. Yeah.
That's wild.
Hmm.
Well, so when you started working in the fire service, and you were riding with is it the guys that you're working with now, same crew that in the fire marshal's office that were just firefighters at the time?
So it is the current fire chief, one of the current deputy chiefs, and myself. So I hold the rank of battalion chief. I'm just underneath the deputy chief. And when I came in, we were all firefighters. So we had the rank of firefighter 1, 2, and 3. They were firefighters 2s and 3s, and I was a trainee. So like by attrition, we have all kind of made that transition. But who would have thunk that same crew and that same group would now be the leadership of the fire department?
That's
So
pretty cool.
it's very cool. And I mean, we're not a huge department, but we're not teeny tiny either. We've got 4 stations. We're lumped into one of the metro cities, and so it's a lot of fun. I'll just say that it's a lot of fun.
That's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the start. In as you started this business, obviously you were working as a firefighter, and then this business shows up. So what was that like, or how did you end up making the transition from like working on a fire truck to then thinking, oh, I'm going to start a consulting business, and then obviously that transition later into what you're doing
Yeah,
today?
and all those things are still going on right now, right? Like it's all still happening, and that's only like when I was talking to Chelsea, it was like that's only like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. I'm still on the same volunteer fire department that I was. I serve on nonprofits. I'm president of the State Fire Marshals Association. I work in Raleigh with legislators,
Oh,
and
that's
I
cool.
do all this other stuff. And so I say that, and it's only by God's grace that I can manage to juggle all of that. But how did that all come? It was just by, I guess the best way to say this, and it probably has to deal with more advice than anything, is be willing to go where the water flows, right? To go
Mm,
back to your hydraulic principles, you can't compress it, you can't move it, but you can let it, when I say you can't move it, meaning you can't go in a direction that it's not willing to go. You can't
yeah.
push it anymore, right? But if you open up that hose and you're willing to open up that lever, just be willing to go,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that's kind of the way that it's been. And that's where I would say I would probably rely on my faith a lot. I pray for a
Mm,
conviction that, that basically if it's not the way that I need to be going, I get the gut feeling, right? God gives us that instinct. So that way we know that it's not okay to do that. Think
yeah.
about it, situationally, if you've ever been pushing on an interior fire, or you've been on a scene and you give a command and then you second guess yourself, there's a reason for that. So,
Yeah.
how did all that evolve? It literally was, I was riding the truck. I was actually a driver at headquarters. My wife was pregnant, and she said, "Hey, that opening in the fire marshal's office that you talked about, and like, what do you think about that? Like,
Yeah.
remember at the volunteer fire department, you did public educations, you did inspections." And I was like, "I don't know, babe. If I leave the truck, like I'm now going to be that guy, and I don't know
Yeah.
that I want to be that guy, right? Like, there was so
Forever
much
misriding backwards,
yeah. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where you're, and I hate to say this, but it's a national platform, so I'm going to say it. Like, there is the us and then there's the them, right? Like, and I try to break down that with the men and women who work with me in my division. I say we are one fire department,
yeah.
right? Like, it can't be us and them. It can't be the prevention division and operations. And I tell the people in operations are like, "Hey, chief, what's going on? Blah, 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 blah." And there's even some kind of resentment. If I had an ops battalion chief versus me coming in a room, it is a little different. And I say, "Hey, last time I checked, we're all wearing the same patch, right? Like, we all have the same badge.
Yeah.
There's just different specialties that give us different talents. It's like a basic versus a medic."
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. In a cardiac arrest, you still need both. So on a structure fire, you
yeah,
still need both.
yeah. So like there's a why to all of that. And so breaking down those barriers, but that's the same pause and reservation that I had, that I had to come to a realization that I have to be willing to wherever God wants to take me. And so for me, it was literally COVID. And so as companies reached out, I just prayed and I just said, "Hey God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it." Like, right. Like I'm open to kind of doing what you want me to do. And so I never in a million years thought this would happen. And in full transparency, there's been trials and a little bit of tribulations when it comes to this stuff, because I'm like, man, I don't know, like, if I should be investing in my consulting firm. That, I mean, quite bluntly, has a client base and pays a lot better, right?
Yeah.
Or is it like the East Coast Kellys and you want to be diverse, but at the same
Sure.
time, it also comes to passion, right? Like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
There is something about doing this cooking and this influencing that is new. I've been doing the fire service gig since 1998. You could pretty much blindfold me and I could go to work and do my job, right? Like
Yeah.
it's different. Everything is different that I do, but it's at the same time, I've done something like it before. But when you do content creation, nobody wants to see the same recipe over and over and over again.
That's a good
So
point.
for
Yeah.
me, I get to scratch the itch of let's come up with something new and a new way of bringing a family closer together at the dinner table that helps break down the barriers. And I know this sounds crazy to say, but like in my world, I get to see in the fire marshal's office, I get to see the effects of fire that a lot
Mm.
of times when people respond to an incident, they don't get to see, right? So after the fire is over with, you get the long-term effects of exposure of fire, right?
Yeah.
It's the supplemental interviews. It's
That's a good
I'll
point. Yeah,
share
I
the
mean, like
story.
I leave a fire, I'm like, okay, great, house is out. See ya, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
I don't think about that house ever again. Unless it was a major problem. Like it's like, okay, whatever, we did the job. I'm out
Or
again.
the natural reaction is to drive by it and say, "Hey, I had a fire there," and it was either really a really good fire, like man, we dragged a lot of hose, or you go back and you go, "Man, that was a joke of a call."
Yeah.
For fire investigators, and especially in the juvenile fire setter realm,
Oh,
what we find is there's a lack of that family bonding that occurs. And so for that 25, that 30-year-old, or that even that young 40-year-old, right? Because I have teenagers at home. If I
sure.
can give that dad or that mom something to bring the whole family to the dinner table, it's my one little bit of influence, right?
Hmm.
It's not about making the money, it's about making the difference.
That's an interesting way you talk. Like, I never really would have thought about like, okay, yeah, the firebug running around the county lighting barns on fire. Like, that's someone that needs something better to do than that. And if you provide something that's like, hey, this is the place where you need to be, whatever. I mean, it's like there could be a million things that pique someone's interest, but like how many firebugs are actually somehow affiliated with the fire service. Let these
Oh
people
yeah.
hear a show like this and hear your story and watch what you do on social media and find their outlet in supporting the fire service versus making up, stuff to do and putting the public at risk. I think that's such an interesting way to look at it.
I wish I had more than 60 seconds to give my why in every reel, but I don't, right? Like I have 60 seconds to give you a reason to do something. And
Yeah.
so my why is not as relevant as much as it is important to have you have a reason, right?
Yeah.
So I use that 60 seconds to give you a reason, not my why. And so that is my way of kind of just scratching my own itch, if you
Mm.
will. And so again, for me, it's great. I would love to, retire early and say that the business is so great. I think social media is moving at such fast paces. It's hard for people like for me as influencers to keep up with the monetization component
Yeah.
of how we make money. So my model is changing in how I do it. Basically, I write contracts with companies to review their product or use their product. But at the end of the day, I'm not pitching their product, because if I was pitching their
Be less
product, it
authentic
would
or
be
something.
QVC, and nobody wants to watch QVC except for the people that aren't on social media, right? Like they're the
Yeah, that's a
they're
good
the
point.
grandmas and grandpas who are like, man, this squeegee cleans your windshield great, and
Yeah.
that's not me. Like, so I've even had to change a little bit of that model, because I mean, if you go back and look at some of my videos, there was a time when I was very pressured by that. I
Interesting. Where
felt
people would ask you like,
pressure.
hey, can you please pitch this for me versus like,
Yes, like and so I did it, and quite bluntly, it killed my algorithm, right? Like, because
interesting.
when you look at the analytics piece of this, and Chelsea's probably getting all excited over there talking the social media piece of this, but when you look at the analytics, like we have the attention span of less than a goldfish. So if I don't capture them in the first 4 to 8 seconds, I've lost them.
They're gone. Yeah.
So if I'm pitching a product right out the gate, like
here's
they're
my
swiping,
sham wow. Yeah, get out of here. They're gone.
yeah, they're like, get this trash out of here. So, I have to be very cautious about what I am pitching,
Mm.
so I love using products. So like a lot of the fire service stuff, I'll accept the product and I'll put it in a story. I'll put it, in different things. And again, case by case, for anybody who's listening, I will gladly have a conversation with you, but I promise you that I will have your intention and my intention best at heart, right? Because
Yeah.
if I don't put it in a way that they'll keep watching me, it's not a good ROI on the money you're paying me.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's really
Right.
interesting that
So
you really approach it so much as a business. I mean, it's like when I think of social media influencers, I picture like people like traveling around like on the beach and like trying to convince people that that's the life to live. Not like I want to take and bring people around a family table and I can use these products to generate revenue that pay for me to do this stuff. Like that's a very different type of business than when I think about my dad. Like if I went back in time when I was 3 years old and I told him that there are businesses that exist that are people sitting in front of a camera showing off, not showing the good, but showing the application and showing what it does. I think people like that would just like, they wouldn't believe it, but you've truly done that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and learning from others who have done it better, right? Like the fire service. Like we don't rewrite a policy, we just go get someone else's and tweak it for ourselves. So a
That's
lot
a
of
good point.
times, instead of watching like these food channels, I will look at it. So I'll look at it and say, how are they influencing you on the product while teaching you how to cook something or a recipe or something like that?
You're kind
A
of looking
prime
behind the
example.
scenes.
Yeah, like I can show you the product and get you to ask questions. And by getting you to ask questions, it then causes you to hit the comment or the like or engage, which then increases the algorithm. And then it gets more exposures, and more exposures means a higher ROI because there's more views. And so all of that is the back end piece of this. That's the business piece of it that when I sit down and talk to companies, they go, oh, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you look at, and I don't mean this in a negative way towards the companies that I'm working with, but if you look at them, if you look at the analytics and the number of views of some of their products that are organic to their company versus the number that I'm getting, it's because people don't necessarily want to go look at a product. They want to go look for something to use.
Yeah.
So it's a new way, if you will, of subliminal messaging, right? That's genuine. Like I'm doing it on purpose, but I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not asking you to buy it. I'm not putting a subliminal message, but if I use this product and then you ask me, then you ask me.
Oh, I liked the thing. It was great.
Yeah. It's not like I'm trying to hide anything. I'm using a product and you like it. You ask me a question.
How did you learn? Like this is such, I mean, we do social media every day. I don't understand this stuff. How did you learn it? Working in the fire service full time? Like, I mean, we've got a whole team and I still feel in the dark. What was your method for figuring
Don't
this thing
ask
out?
me to tie knots, do TR, okay? Because that's not what I'm doing in my spare time. So, and that's true, right? Like, again, I'll go back. We have to have ownership in that. So whether I'm putting out or trying to put out or teach others, because, you know, part of my teaching is I teach like fire and life safety educator, and this is all of it. So I've learned it through that training and applying it in a different way, or whether it's just me wanting to make sure that I do my job, whether it's, you know, the one who pays me and is going to pay me a good pension, or it's the one that I have as a side business. I want to make sure that it puts the best product out there. So doing a lot of that research, like even this past Saturday, I spent all day at a YouTube institute through the North Carolina Small Business Institute, just trying to learn how to be better at YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Because it's probably my weakest platform. I get it, but I don't get it. And so I say I don't get it. 90% of the day I was like, yep, got it. Ooh, didn't know that. And then got it. So it's literally one of those things that we need that affirmation of making sure.
Yeah.
But again, it's just about investing that time in yourself. I mean, you know, it's like a guy who cuts grass and there's a million in the fire service who cut grass, right? Like,
yeah.
And not sharpening your blades. Right? Like, why would you be a grass cutter and not sharpen your blades? So that's the same thing for me. I could go out there and put out a product, but if I'm not researching lighting and analytics and all this other stuff, I have junk and I'm not going to get business.
How did you kind of like make the shift, or like what was your first video like? Tell me about that.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible.
What was the topic?
My first video, I think. Well, first off, on TikTok, it was my youngest son wanting to make some funny ones. And I still have them on there, right? Because that's the family part of it. I want you to know that family matters. But I've also learned since then that I can't put that on there because, again, if you wanted to see my family, that's one channel, but it's not about another channel, right? So that's not there. But some of the first cooking videos, I was truly learning. So my lighting, I don't even remember what I was cooking, honestly. But the one that got me almost viral, it almost had 1 million views and I don't know how many 100,000 likes, was literally me cooking eggs and I burnt them. Like I literally, like they were brown. And so I was like, hey, it's Brian from East Coast Kelly's. Like, I want you to like my video and subscribe so that way I can cook live for you. Like, and the audio was bad. I almost sounded like a 1-800 number, like that you would listen to at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like it just was, the quality was not there.
Why did you do number 2? What was it that was like, all right, that sucked, but I still loved that?
why do you go back in and pull ceilings again? Because the fire has to be put out, right? Like, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I
Fair.
could not,
No one loves
I
pulling ceiling when you
couldn't,
got to do it.
yeah, like I had to get it right. Like there was not an option to not get it right. And then people that I knew were like, "Hey, I saw you on TikTok." So then there's this guilt of having to do it right.
Yeah.
And then actually started to have fun with it, like the research piece of it. So then it was more about learning, right? About being better, not at what paid me, about what what I did in my regular day job.
Yeah.
I'm the PIO for my volunteer fire department. It's my way of kind of giving back to that organization because I like you have a lot of irons in the fire. I wish I could just run up and go to every fire call that pops off, but I can't. So
Yeah.
that's my way of kind of giving back. So I schedule posts. And so I'm like, well, if I don't learn it from me and this page goes stale, right? Like this whole cooking thing doesn't work out, I can use it, elsewhere.
That's a good point.
And so like it literally just kind of has evolved to where now like I'm blown away. Like I had heard stories about people, like I've got product, I'm looking at one right now off to the side. I've got a product that was sent to me 2 to 3 weeks ago that I just got to find time to like use it and make it fit into life. Like I just have to make
it got to
work.
look and feel organic. It can't just look forced. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you don't want it to be fake, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you've got to make it work. And the other thing that I'll say about my channel is it does take up a lot of time, right? It is extremely difficult to make it work. Like the other night I got home, I was doing a live actually with Unkies.
Nice.
On Friday. And so we went live on TikTok together. He was all scruffy and, had the baby face going, and so I'm out there and we were talking and I was like, I really wanted to cook tonight. I have the stuff, but you know what I did? I reheated pizza. And that's the real part of it, right? Like that's where I just want to show that it's okay to not put on some fake part of me that says I'm going to do this. I'm obligated to do these certain things for these certain companies that pay me.
Yeah.
But I never want it to be a part. And again, I'm not talking bad about my 7 years as county fire marshal, but I would work 60 to 80 hours a week. Why did I go back to the city? Because I only have a certain amount of time with my young kids and then they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have something that allowed me to be able to spend time with them around the dinner table, that supplemented my income, that paid for little things here and there that I wanted to do, and that could literally bring us together.
Yeah.
My youngest son was like, "Dad, I told you should have done this." I can't believe, because we were unpacking all the stuff to do this. And he was like, "Dad, I told you should have done this. Like, it's all because of me." And I was like,
so
okay,
funny.
ego check for your kid. He's like 12. And I was like, it's really cool though, isn't it? And so
That's neat.
I'm going in to do a career day at my oldest kids. And they're like, "Hey,
what are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about social media? Are you going to talk about fire? I feel like you could pick so many different topics.
So it actually happened in the past, and that's what I was going to share the story with. So he was in 8th grade and I go in to do this career presentation. The teacher asked me to talk about being the fire marshal. What do you think the kids want to talk about?
Yeah, they want to talk about social media, TikTok.
They want to talk about social media. They're like,
Yeah.
And then all of my oldest son, he's big into sports. And so the other day he comes in and he's like, "Hey Dad, we're going to have a draft party for like the NFL picks, like NFL fantasy. So can you cook for everybody? Like you could make a video out of it." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it."
That's awesome.
But it's a blessing. It really is, because again, I never in a million years would have thought it. We just we're in the final stages of signing another contract with another company, and so it's an amazing thing. I wish I could say like it's enough to take the place of the consulting. I don't think that gives enough justice, right? Like that's the whole point of this podcast. That is truly a beautiful business model in and of itself too.
Yeah.
And there is that market in and of itself is big enough for other people to get into it too.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
So I want to learn more about this, like social media, monetization, brand deals. Can you explain a little bit like of the nuts and bolts of what that's actually like?
Yeah, so the monetization and the brand deals. So different platforms have different thresholds to make money off of your reels, right? So if anybody wants to get into it, let's say it's not cooking, let's say they like hunting or they like fishing or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to pick a niche and you have to basically go fishing figuratively, right? Like you have to start making a channel that focuses off of that. So the name East Coast Kellys came as a result of a group text between my nieces who live in California. They're the West Coast Kellys, and they jokingly started calling us East Coast Kellys. So when I created my TikTok, I was like, what are we going to call us? And so as my son and I were making those funny videos, it was like, oh, we're just going to be East Coast Kellys. And it literally stuck.
That's funny.
So it fits the brand. However, if you're creating a content channel, you need to make sure that the name is relevant to the content that you're creating, right? Like you wouldn't want Jim Smith barbecue and then you're doing hunting, right? Like that's not some way that somebody can find you. It's not searchable. It's not relevant. So for those folks, those firefighters who are wanting to find it, and there's tons of different ways, right? Like, I mean, that's the beauty of the fire service, the uniqueness that gives us the horizon, if you will, for us to look out across, is there's different niches for everyone with their hobbies and their interest, right? Like that's what makes it so much different. I think what draws in the fire service to me, and what I get the viewers off of that is because again, I'm in the fire service. A lot of people don't know that I hold the rank of chief. They just know I'm a firefighter. They saw the apron with the stripes on it, reflective striping, and that's kind of what they saw.
Yeah.
But they make that connection, or they make the connection of the cooking. So no matter who it is, make sure that the content is relevant and relatable. That is why that's important for the monetization piece of this, because again, if they can't connect with you, they're not watching you. And if they're not watching you and it's not long enough, you're going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die, not literally, but figuratively
the channel,
in the algorithm.
How does
nobody watches it?
Who actually like writes the check? Is it like Facebook or whomever says like, hey, it's valuable to us that you have a following? Or is it like advertisers paying Facebook or TikTok or like, where's it come from?
Advertisers pay Facebook. Facebook puts it on ads on Reels. And you had to be very cautious because if you use music, the music will get you copyrighted and it doesn't monetize.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So people don't realize that, right? Like they're like, oh, I'm going to make this thing. And like, there's this new song that everyone loves. It's like #1 on the chart. So I'm going to do that. And yeah, that'll cause you to go viral real quick. Right.
But the songwriter makes the money, not you then.
Yes. You don't get any money off of it at all.
Interesting.
So you have to be very careful about that. So again, when you're editing it, if you decide not to do any money or any music at all, you got to make sure there's no background noise. I literally watched one the other day. Great content. The guy put music over music and he was trying to talk and it was just, it was bad. It was real bad. And so you have to be situationally aware because again, if it's something where someone can't hear what you're saying because you don't have it edited, and guys, there's so many, I'm speaking to viewers here for a second. There's so many different ways to literally edit it.
Yeah.
There's so many free apps that you can use, whether it's CapCut or Canva or some of these other different programs. Just go research it, but literally you can clean up the majority of your stuff real quick and put a decent product out that the majority of folks would be like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
That's awesome. Can you pick can you pick the types of ads? Like, can you restrict it? Do you have any say in that? Or it's just like, someone's been watching the video, they're gonna get it.
For all I know, dog food could be on the same.
Yeah, no idea.
As my taco meat, I have no idea. Like, and I mean, I would love to think that I would have that kind of influence on the content, but in full fairness, I don't.
Yeah,
I think that's where the brand deals really come from, right? And
so that's the other revenue channel is brand. So the social platforms have ad revenue, and then the brand deals are a separate way to monetize the same video.
Yeah. So probably the best time that I was making money was ads on Reels through Facebook, right? And Facebook was losing their backside because they had basically wrote a check that they couldn't cash. I mean, and people, got onto it. And I won't say they couldn't cash it. I mean, Facebook, let's be honest, they make a lot of money, but then they started looking at the books and they're like, man, we keep this up, we're going to go broke. So because anybody could basically monetize off of it.
Yeah.
Right. So people were making it. You didn't have to have a company like mine. You could do it, right? Yeah. Not under the FireTech brand, you could do it. And so it was good secondary income. There was ladies learning how to put on makeup and people cooking, and all this other stuff. So the other part of that is those brand deals are what are really genuine. And so there are contracts. I just emailed one out last night, and you are also giving rights to your likeness. I mean, the reality of it is that I am selling a video to a company, and so they own that
And
video,
you're on
and
it.
so they own it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my likeness, whether I agree with what they do after that fact, it's now their video.
Interesting.
So
How did you write
yeah,
that
and
contract? I feel like I would have no idea where to start writing a name and likeness contract. Get out of here. Where'd that come
AI is
from?
very helpful. Just remember that.
That's awesome.
So work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah.
When you have a lot of irons in the fire, you learn that AI is very helpful for that. But also at the same time, you got to be able to review it, and then you have to be able to see what you feel comfortable with,
Yeah.
right? Like, the one last night says, here's what I'm willing to do. Anything beyond that, we're going to renegotiate every time. And so, again, it goes back to what you feel like. But I've started going down that hole because I don't like the idea of putting all my eggs in the ads basket.
Yeah.
Because in the fine print of the Facebook contract, which is way more complex than the brand deal contracts that I'm putting out,
Yeah.
it basically says that all these platforms reserve the right to change it at a moment's notice. Let me give one example of that. So like I mentioned, I went in this YouTube class, and I learned this weekend that if I just have 500 followers, and I'm at 400 now, like I said, I'm terrible when it comes to YouTube, but I'm growing. But if I just have 500, and I was like, I'm there, bet I can get 100 people in a month. I'm not worried about that. But I have to have 3 million views in 90 days. And I'm like, who gets 3 million views? Like, I'm not Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Like, I can't,
Yeah.
I can't do that.
And what does that let you do
So-
with YouTube then? Then you can monetize with them or something?
Yes. So again, that's one of those things that are when I pitch a brand deal, I say, here's my views across all these platforms, right? So you can pay, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whoever, X amount of dollars to boost your video on one platform, or you can pay me and you have the potential to reach this many followers across all 5.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that I pitch it. That's my business model. And like I said, so far it's been very successful.
Do you have the ability to choose who you work with? Or not the ability, but like, do you ever have people bring you stuff and you're like, hey, can you show off this thing? And you're like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I turned away children's toys. I've turned away, little things like that. Like they're like, oh, you have a family channel, right? Like your kids. But that's one of those things where it needs to fit the algorithm that I'm in, because if not, it's useless to me.
Interesting.
Right? Like, I know that sounds bad to say, but it's worth it, but it's not. Like when I first was doing this, and like the sensation and the sizzle of like, wow, companies are going to send me stuff for free.
Yeah, it's gotta be cool
like,
feeling.
yeah.
I feel like it'd be sick.
Yeah, like I don't care if I'm going to use this or not. I want the Amazon truck to show up at my house, or I want UPS to show up at my house. And so I was like, yeah, this is great. And then I started to realize, like, how do I make this fit?
That's a good point. It's got to be for the long term, not the short term. In the short term, you have all the random stuff on that doesn't fit your channel, and then you got no viewers, got no long term.
Yeah, and then long term, it really hurts you. And so again, the people that you have no control over, I'm not paying people to watch my stuff.
Yeah.
People are paying me to have their stuff and what people are watching. So I have to be very strategic in what I put out there.
That's really cool. Well, I'm going to do a pivot. I'm going to ask about, I want to know about some on your journey, like anywhere, whether it was a fire academy, it was at work, it was in the thing. Tell me a little bit about some of the mentors that have been folks that have helped you get clarity about like what your steps are, what the next steps are, help you discern that sort of thing.
Wow, that's loaded, because there has been so many people that have kind of been influential along the way. Like I said, whether it was a friend of mine who, convinced me to join the volunteer fire department, who put me on this path, right? Like all because it was a cool thing to do and I got tired of getting left at the firehouse. Or whether it was volunteer fellow volunteer fire chiefs, like when I was county fire marshal, and I sat and I listened to the stories of history and legacies and stuff, and it really wasn't about who they were as much as it was their story. Right?
Were there
like
any impactful ones you remember specifically?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I remember specifically sitting across from a father and son and talking and hearing their stories about how they had joined the volunteer fire department, and or had started the volunteer fire department. Like the dad had started it along with some other folks in the community, and how the son had he would be at home. It was back when they had the fire whistle, and then they had a telephone tree.
Oh, really?
So
So they call through and like,
yeah. So like he said, hey, I would push the buttons, And that guy, the father has since passed. I've been doing this 25 years, so that the father has since passed. The son is now the volunteer fire chief. The legacy
That's
continues.
cool.
It's so cool. And it was like, when I get frustrated, right, and I want to beat my head up against the wall, right, because at my level of being in management in the fire service, that's the hard part, right? Like we have to put on this front, right? And as a business owner, you go behind the door, you close the door, right? And whether it's you're owning your own business or whether you're in management, and you're like, there are some things that are just outside of my control, right?
Yeah.
But the cool part about the lesson that I learned and the mentorship from that guy was, no matter what, when things were down, he engaged the right people and he kept going, right? Like they just kept going. They found ways, whether it was converting an old farm truck into a tanker because somebody lost everything and they owed it to their community. By God, I can get up and I can just keep going.
Yeah, that's before
right?
the NFPA rules and whatever. This is like, look, I need a fire truck. I got to put the house out. Like, what are you talking about? We're going to go.
Yeah, there was no baffling in no trucks. There was none of that kind of stuff. It was like,
hope you don't flip, drive slow around the corner, put the fire out, move on.
Yeah, they just needed to do it. So, that, or whether I've had other amazing mentors, some of the Metro chiefs. I go back to folks like Dan Jones, who was the fire chief at Chapel Hill. He's been retired a while now, but and as I was preparing to be interim chief, and I didn't know it, I say preparing, I had no idea that I would have been interim chief for about 8 months. And so as I was preparing for that, I went back to a conference where he said, being the fire chief is a lot like playing chess. Every piece on the board means life or death to you. And I would have never thought about it that way. But there was those little nuggets. But there have been, so many different people, especially like with the Fire Marshals Association, past presidents that I pick up the phone and I talk to, of people that were my mentors along the Fire Marshals, Association journey, that just help me balance it.
Yeah.
Right. They remind me that it's not my journey alone and that I have people to help me. And, cause that's our type A personality, right? Like if you took a firefighter and you said, hey, I need that 100-foot section to be back on the truck, you would literally give yourself a hernia trying to pick up all 100-foot section and carry it back to the truck because that's what I was told to do. And that's what I've got to get done.
Yeah.
But sometimes it was the task, right? It was the task that was assigned to you, not the job that you had to do all on your own. And I think that's kind of the mentorships that have been so influential to me, the little nuggets that have been sprinkled all along the way. Like I said, when I was in high school, I had an ag teacher who literally, if it was not for him, I would not have graduated high school.
Wow.
Like I am certain of it. Like 2 days before, my English teacher was like, Kelly, if this report's not in, you're not walking. And so he literally sat with me in that ag building while he did lesson plans and I worked on the classroom computer. This is back in the 90s. We had one computer. It's not like today, like where everybody's got one, right? And I didn't have a computer at home. And I wrote my research paper while he stayed late. Like he could have easily been doing that at home, but at night he made sure that, I got it done.
That's awesome.
So,
well, can you take me behind the curtain of when I view social media, I view what's on the screen and I can't see anything behind the screen. All I can see is the content that's produced. It's even if it's raw and organic, it's raw and organic, but there's got to be a story. What is it that you don't see about like how you plan or how you structure before and after and the comments? Like what's that impact on you?
Oh, wow. So it is very hard. Sunday, as we're driving, this past Sunday, as we were driving to the USS North Carolina, I had an engagement as president of the Fire Marshals Association. And so I've got my wife over there writing a grocery list, right? As I'm driving to the battleship to do presidential duty type stuff. She's over there and I'm like, we're trying to plan our meals because that's the content for the week. Now, don't get me wrong. My wife loves this whole channel thing because I think since I've done this, she has cooked maybe about 3 times.
That's awesome.
Maybe 4. And that's usually when I was gone away for work. And like, even tonight I've got to work. She'll pick up something. She's not even going to cook.
Yeah.
So, but like behind the curtains there's a lot that goes into production. So I used to do a lot of lives
Mm.
And it was very, very hard to set up the cameras and get the food ready and then go outside. What about the weather? Like, I don't
Oh,
have
that's a
this
good point.
elaborate outdoor kitchen like that a lot of people have. Like, it's literally the backdrop of my pool, that's what draws a lot of people. A lot of people want that. And so, it's there, but you got to set up cameras, and then you got to get your cooks out, and then there was all this stuff, and so then I'm trying to get the family, full transparency, right? Because this is the real. They're eating on paper plates, and Dad's got it on this nice plate because that's the one he took the shot of, and my kid was like,
Interesting.
it's one of those things that's the real aspect of it, and so there is a lot of
So
planning.
are
There's a
they kind
lot
of behind the scenes, like you're whatever, and they're kind of like filtering around?
No, they reap the benefits and it's all a one-man band. I wish it was, but there for a little while, I will say it was very helpful when I would do lives, because that was really hard. And I am vowing to do it again. Like, I had a TV that I could cast to, that I could read the comments. But I've literally even had a proposal here recently where they are going to come along with me and they are going to help. I've got a couple proposals for cooking events for large gatherings.
That's cool.
And so I'll do the cooking. They're going to do the helping. I mean, they are the brand of East Coast Kelly's, right?
That's cool.
But I ain't going to lie. I mean, they're teenage kids. And so, the wife helps. She pays the bills. She orders and gets the foods and the groceries and stuff. But in full transparency, it is very, very helpful for me sometimes to have that clear space, right? That's that creativeness.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you get much more in there, it kind of blurs things. My youngest son is very apt to come out sometimes and help me cook. And in full transparency, that's some of the best videos I get, like viewership wise, is because they love seeing that family component of a family cooking together.
That's really cool. I feel like that'd be a lot of fun. And it sounds like a lot of work, but it could be a lot of fun too,
Oh, without a doubt. Like, one of the most stressful videos I ever did. So I brought, my wife got me what's called a solo stove pie. So it's a wood-fired pizza oven. If you've got a solo stove, it's a pizza attachment that goes on the top of it.
Nice.
And so a dear friend of our family, he's 92 years old. He is the oldest living wildlife officer. They're literally naming part of the stuff here in North Carolina, like a building after this guy.
That's cool.
And so my father-in-law shows him a video of me cooking. And so he's like, I really want one of them pizza pies that he makes and everything. So I'm going over there. I'm cooking it live. I'm cooking it for a guy that he has a place called the Country Kitchen, and he's literally hosted governors at his house.
That's cool.
And here I am cooking for the guy. And I can cook live. I would flip pancakes on a Sunday morning and have 1,400 people. But cooking a pizza for this guy was more stressful than anything.
It's like that guy's opinion really matters.
Yeah, his opinion really matters. He knows people, right? And he at 92, what does he care if he talks smack?
That's
right?
true. No one to impress.
He doesn't care. He's going to go to town and be like, yeah, that Kelly kid, he couldn't cook a pizza if his life's dependent on it.
That's funny. What's it like? Have you ever had any, not negative press, but sometimes I read a negative comment and I'm just like, it breaks my heart. How do you deal with that stuff?
Oh man. So one of the Facebook, one of the ones that went viral, was almost 2 million views. I was cooking hot dogs for my wife's second grade, end of year party. Those aren't done enough. Those are burnt. Why didn't you wash the hot dogs? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And so what I finally realized is, why is there all the different types of restaurants? Why is there 10 different types of burger joints? I just got to let that just go. And the people that are going to like it, and use the negative comments as fuel, because that's only things that help my algorithm.
Interesting.
Right?
So even negative comments are actually not bad because there's comments.
No, the people don't realize that. Keep the hate coming, man, because that creates a conversation, which helps the algorithm, right? So it's not a bad thing. What frustrates me more than anything is, there was this voiceover that says, I'm not famous yet because you haven't liked my stuff. He says something else, but it's a true statement. I have a lot of people at the firehouse who are like, hey, I saw that video or whatever. And I look at them and I'll go, but you didn't like it. Right. So you have I'm situationally aware to that.
Yeah.
But, and it's not me taking it personal, but it does say, hey, if you appreciate my stuff enough to stop me in the hallway and say, hey, Chief, I really like that. Take 2 seconds. Just double tap the screen, right? You took enough to
it's quick.
Swipe up, just double tap. That helps a lot.
Well,
right? So I'm not worried about the negative as much as I am the no interaction.
That's a good point. Yeah. Someone just views it. Simply viewing it is but viewing it and doing something, a like, a comment, or something, I'm sure that's definitely the meat of it, because it's creating community. I mean, that's ultimately the deal.
Yeah, and even if you don't, as any of your podcasters, if they don't even go follow me, I would say that it's not an end of the world thing, right? But like for folks like you and other people that you've had on your content, if me cooking on a griddle is not your thing, I get it, right? Like there's 8 billion people in this world, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. Not everybody's into griddle content, but for the people that you are, whatever it is, right? If it's basket weaving, like their content, because it needs to know that they're getting a good ROI on what they're putting out.
You know what I think about the podcast? I told this to a guy. The podcast, actually, I told this to I emailed with the doctor from the Netflix series. I can't remember what it's called. Live ER, something in like from Lenox Hill up in thing.
Mhm.
And I told him, like, look, I launched a podcast recently, and I think a lot about his Netflix series, and I think about our podcast. Granted, totally different scales. But I emailed him and said, like, the one thing that I don't get on the podcast that I get on the social channels is that feedback to know how things happened. And I kind of equate it to, like, when you work a cardiac arrest and you do the whole thing, you get ROSC, you throw them in the truck, you take them to the ER, and then you never know what the hell happened. It's just gone. Yeah. You spend all that time and effort and everything, and then you wonder what's the story. This podcast, and I don't know if in the Talk world it's the same, but like in the podcast, it lands in the world, and I never hear what happened. And there's not those comments, there's not that stuff. Yeah. And so at FDIC this year, we had people come up and they were like, oh my God, we've heard the 2448, we love it. And it was like such great validation, because I don't see that daily, like, the feed of churn of stuff that happens, because there's just not an avenue to like and share and that sort of stuff like there is in other channels.
So one of the things on my channel, and I'm sure that comment feeds you, one of the greatest compliments that I have is when I have somebody who cooks whatever it is that I have made and post it on their channel and tags me in it, or post it on their personal page or whatever and tags me in it. I had another good friend of mine. He's his name is Big 919 Country, and he is he's actually a volunteer in Wayne County. I had to get my counties right in my brain there, but he's in Wayne County, and so he's part of the Blackstone Griddle crew, which is part of like the legit Blackstone group.
Interesting.
And he saw my live. I did let's see if I can get this right without getting tongue tied. A bacon cheese wrapped Frito chili cheese dog. It's very, very complex. Dog. It's not good for cardio. I can tell you that. Okay. It's not good at all. And you got to eat it with a fork. But he's a brand ambassador for a local hot dog distributor here in Eastern North Carolina. They're bright red. You probably know.
Brightleaf's hello.
Yeah, he's a Brightleaf guy.
I love a red hot dog. Hello.
Yes.
Now we're BFFs. We can connect over something.
There you go. So he's a Brightleaf guy. Like he literally does it. So he used Brightleaf bacon. He used the Brightleaf dog. Like he literally recreated my stuff, and I was like, yes. I am winning in this world, because of what it was. So that affirmation of that really helps. And again, I think scratching the itch of when people come up to you and say, hey, I saw your stuff. I really like it. Just like you said, it really helps a lot. And I give my guys at the firehouse, I would never tell someone in the general public, hey, you didn't like my stuff. But the guys at the firehouse,
hang hell on those guys. That's the job,
Well, and full transparency, they reap the benefits of overflow of free stuff.
I'm sure
that Brian gets at the house, right? Like, I can only use so much seasoning of certain things and all these other things that I get. So there are times when some of that overflow comes, but I'm like, man, y'all see it. Or better yet, like, it's nothing for me. Like the last couple of years I've cooked for my crew for Christmas.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, that's one of those things where I enjoy doing it and I appreciate it. So that's the affirmation that kind of helps me kind of close those things up.
That's really cool. I was like trying to figure out a way I could weave in and wonder, like, do you guys got bright leaves down there? It's so funny.
Oh yeah. No doubt.
No, that's really cool though. I think that's I think it's probably, what's the word? Like when someone does, whether they send you a letter afterwards, an email, a comment, share, like you do this content and it's really fun to do, but it's really fun to see others engage with it. And I think that as people are starting businesses, that doesn't happen on day one. I mean, you have to, those hard yards. I remember our first social videos, like we had like 150 Facebook likers or whatever, comment, whatever, I don't even know what to call these guys. And like now, we've got a broader audience, but in the early days, you just had to keep going, keep trudging. And I feel like when Chelsea interviewed for your pre-interview for the show, she told me there was like 4,000 likers or 9,000 likers or something. Now you've got 40,000 followers on these platforms. Yeah. Like that growth doesn't happen. It's not like a straight up and to the right. It's like a check mark and it just rips once you get going, but you got to stay in it.
Yeah, it is. It has been extremely challenging, right? Like, and there's hills and valleys, right? Like I said, lessons learned, like that whole QVC era that I went through of like, hey, here's a knife from Japan available in my Amazon storefront. Like, I was like, because I felt obligated to do that. And now it's like, I'm just not, that's not what I'm doing anymore. Like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to put things out there because again, I had to go to that business model concept because
Yeah.
if I want to keep those contracts going and keep the revenue coming in, right? Like, take the creativity out of this. The fact of the matter is the people that are paying me are looking at my views. And if I don't change the way that my concept is, they're going to walk away.
Yeah, you got to
So
perform.
I have to look at it from that perspective and that lens and say, how do I keep the people that I have no control over engaged in my content to make sure that I keep the other people that are paying me at the table?
Yeah.
And so that's where I've had to, and those conversations were much easier, full transparency, than what I thought they were going to be. Like, I thought that these companies were going to be like, yeah, we're not going to do this if you're not. And then they were like, nope, we're going to give you that creative latitude. Like, we didn't make you get the way that you are in numbers by telling you what to do. So we're good.
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier conversation than what I thought it would be.
It's interesting. So it must not always be sunshine and unicorn farts though. Like what's that's my technical abbreviation. What's it like? What's the hard part of it? Like what's the part that people don't get or that they don't know about?
Well, juggling, right? Like, to juggle all of that. And I still reach out to companies, right? Like, and still getting the no, right? Like, a no is never easy.
Yeah.
Right. So, prime example, I don't mind sharing this. Like, I need a pellet grill. And so, like, I have literally used mine. So I've reached out to several brands and said, hey, I want to be a part of your family. And, and again, these are companies that I've invested time, went to stores, looked at their products and said, I want to do this. And so they say, we have only this certain time that we're open. We'll re-review your application. And the fact of the matter is, if you went to barbecue TikTok or whatever, like, the market is flooded, right?
Yeah. So there's enough people that are like, we can pick one more. I mean,
it doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing what you're doing or this or that. And it's not the same niche of the small business that I cater to.
Yeah.
They're big enough companies that they have their own full-time chefs hired.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. So they don't need the guy at home that's shade tree barbecuing, right? Like, that's not what they're looking for. And so those are always harder to say no, because you think that you're good enough. And it's not that you're not good enough. It's just that it's not your time.
Yeah.
I use the saying all the time at work. It's never a no, it's a how and a when. Right. So it's all in when it's time, and it's all in how it's the right time. So those are always the hard ones to do. And then the second one is juggling it in life. Like, I had a company who sent me a meat thermometer, and they were like, hey, we're just reaching back out because we haven't seen the video yet. And I was like, no, it didn't come. And they were like, are you sure? We have where it was sent and, came on this date. And I went to the cabinet, and it was just like, oh God, they did send it. It's there. My wife unpacked it.
Got it, put it away, right?
Yeah, she's like, oh, it's another one of his thermometers. In the cabinet it goes, right?
That's funny.
And so just trying to juggle all that along with everything else I have going.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, because you do want to, and that was one of the ones that, and I know this sounds bad to say, but that's one of those companies that just sent me something to try it. And it was like, it's worth a couple $100. Yeah, send it to me and I'll review it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like it was a reoccurring brand deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a contract. So it was like, those are ones I'm very cognizant to.
Yeah.
It's the little things that help get the big companies to say, hey, it's kind of like a portfolio, right? Like, by doing those little small ones, companies see, hey, he puts out a great product.
Do you have like a pitch deck or a pitch like when you send your email and like, hey, I'm interested in whatever, do you have like, these are the 3 pieces of content I want you to view, or something like that?
Yeah. So yes and no. I always point them to my page. I always want to be transparent because, right, like, I want you to see multiple layers. I've heard about your interview process at how you do things at FireTech, right? And you're in different layers of an interview process with different people. And I want people to see the good, the bad, and the real, right? Like, I want you to see, like you said, that it's not all like, this is who East Coast Kelly's is. Like, I'm going to have days that I give you phenomenal product, usage. And there's going to be other times where I'm just trying to get content out and it's not the best lighting, but by God, I showed your product,
Yeah.
right? Like, and they're going to do that research, whether I give them the 3 best that I got or not, because by God, 40,000 people are seeing the mediocre stuff. They might as well too.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I'm not trying to hide any of that. I'm very transparent with people. I was on an inspection yesterday and a lady told me, she's like, you don't put up with a whole lot. And I said, I've been doing the fire service for 25, 30 years. I didn't necessarily have the easiest upbringing, and I don't believe in playing Candyland and Monopoly. Like we're not in a game here. Like this is life, not the game life. This is the real life. And so this is what I got. If you want me to be in it, like I'm there with you.
Yeah, whether it's
I'm
fire service or business, you're fully in.
Yeah. It's just, this is who I am. And yeah, here I am. And I'll be the first to apologize. People will get blown away by that, right? We live in a society, take the fire service away from it. People automatically, I listen to a lot of leadership podcasts. And one of the most important things that I feel like that we lack is trust. Right. So in the business model, I want you to know that you can trust me when I say something.
Yeah.
So sometimes some of the biggest ways to increase trust is by being honest with people. So just looking across and looking someone in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. Or I'm sorry, we dropped the ball on this. Or I'm sorry, I can't give you 10 videos a month. I can give you 2.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at, because I owe it, to the 4 other companies that I'm working with, or 10 or whatever it is that month.
There's so many hours in a day, you got to be realistic.
Yeah. I mean, don't oversell yourself. Be honest with people, because if you're not, you're going to under deliver. Right. So just that speaks in my mind. I feel like that's the only way I can lay my head down at night and kind of get good sleep.
Yeah. Authenticity sounds like is a very important thing to you in your business, in your personal career. And I feel like authenticity is a word I would use to describe what you're working on in your personal brand, your professional brand, both,
Oh yeah. I had a fire chief, who, when we had an incident, when we were doing fundraising for our local, and I sat across from him. I had come back. Very tragic story. I was out there on the volunteer fire department by myself. I responded to this incident a couple of days before Thanksgiving. Young lady had died in the car accident. I had a tractor trailer in the ditch. It had spilled, I don't know how many gallons of diesel fuel. And I had an incident where we were selling ad space in a calendar. And so this old man had this business, got the script all confused. And so like the then county fire marshal who they were selling to got it all screwed up, and he was threatened to arrest the guy that was doing the sales for us.
Oh no.
He's like, he's impersonating a firefighter and this, that, and the other. And so I went back and I sat down across from the fire chief, and I'll never forget, he sat across the table from me. And this same guy who offered me a job, like a year and a half later, here I am, like 2 years at the fire department, and I'm now like the union president. I have no clue what I'm doing. And he says, Kelly, I can budget for fire trucks and fire stations, but what I can't budget for is the trust that the community has in us. And I said, that's very true. And those little things like that are what has just been ingrained in the back of my mind. I can remember the conversation. I can remember the moment. I can remember everything. So in everything that I do, I try to remember moments like that. It's the same thing with, my business model. Pat Lencioni, I was listening to one of his podcasts recently, and as well as Andy Stanley, and both of them in their leadership podcasts talked about integrity. You can lead with no integrity, and then in the end, integrity, the lack of it, is going to come back to haunt you.
Yeah. Right.
Like you can build a business off of it, and then all of a sudden, when it's time to cash in, people are going to be like, man, he just didn't have it.
Yeah.
I don't know about that guy.
Yeah.
So I would rather, like you said, and I think that's where those spikes come from, is because people go, he's genuine. Like, I mean, I as the saying goes, when I take my last breath, I don't want to have any regrets. Yeah. Right. Like that's kind of the goal.
What's something that you could talk to, or you could tell firefighters about the journey? Our show, we celebrate the entrepreneurial first responders. And so first responders oftentimes start off in the public safety role. And then there's free time. There's the 48 hours off. That's what the 24/48 stands for. What would you tell someone, or what would you kind of share with someone about that considering starting a business, the entrepreneurial question, like, I think the fire service is the greatest gift for entrepreneurial people because it allows them to have a stable, steady income founded on a group that I think generally has a pretty good set of morals. And then that gives them time to go start their enterprise. What would you share with people about that relationship between public safety and business?
Yeah, wow, that's a really deep question, and what I would say is, the private sector work ethic was something that was just instilled in me a long time ago. I was cleaning bathrooms when I was like 12, but the side hustle is something that's relatively new to me, right? Like I go back, I always worked for somebody else, I always had multiple jobs, but the owning my own business was something that, because I went to, you know, days so long ago and then work in the fire marshal's office, it's something that's new to me. But the same type of determination that has you the desire to get promoted, that has the same desire to you to date that person that you just can't live without, is the same type of determination, the same type of grit that you should have that puts you into your business. And what I've realized is that if you spend half as much time, and I say this as a guy who's on social media, but scrolling stuff that's not beneficial to you and investing it in how it can make you good, like just like how you asked me, hey, how did you learn all this?
Yeah.
Right? Like I wasn't watching the things on social media that I found interesting. Like I carved out a little bit of me time, but the rest of that time, because you got to have the me time, right? Like you
Yeah.
cannot not have that. But the rest of the time was about focusing on what matters. And I see so many people today that they give more to me, right, in a different context. It's not about focusing on how to be better. It's about how to focus on doing less. And what I mean by that is like they just don't have the same grit,
Hmm.
right? Like I took a lesson from my brother's father-in-law. When he got married, I went out to California. I was a brand new fire inspector. I went out there, and he's a German guy who's made very well for himself. And he said to me, he said, hey, you're a fire inspector there back home, right? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, I just want to give you one piece of advice. I've been a business owner for a long time. And I'm like, oh gosh, what's going to happen here? Like, I've never met this guy
Yeah.
before in my life. And here he is pointing his finger, this big German guy, he's pointing his finger in my face. And he says, just remember, every day that you go to work, you're working towards retirement. And I said, yes, sir, I can tell you. I've got 23 years, 7 months, this many days. He goes, and every day that I go to work, I'm working for my retirement. I'm working for it.
Hmm.
See, for me, I knew exactly how many years, how many days, how many months until my check was coming in. Every day he went to work, he didn't know where the next check was coming from because he had to work that much harder for it.
Interesting.
And that changed, first off, it changed my entire perspective. When I got on that plane and I headed back east, right, from Los Angeles, and I landed, it gave me a totally different perspective on code enforcement and how I interacted with the mom and pop business,
Yeah.
right? Instead of hey, you're going to do it because I said so, and tap my collars and my pen and my paper. It gave me a different perspective. It caused me to have to look at things and give a why. But when I opened my own business, I went back to that recollection and that vault and said, this is not going to be easy. This is going to require determination, investment, right? Like
Yeah.
there's going to be time where I have to give when nobody else is willing to give it. So don't be the guy that's in there with the other guy that doesn't care, watching NCIS in the day room at 9 o'clock at night. What are you
Yeah.
doing with that time?
Yeah.
Right? Like, are you diving into it? I've listened to the podcast, and the one thing, the common denominator of all your guests was the time, the downtime that they had at the firehouse. They invested back into what mattered, which was not, shooting hoops or NCIS or whatever. It was back into what's made them great, what made them to be on the podcast,
Yeah.
which was back to their company. And that's the same advice that I took.
That's really interesting. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you being on the show with us. I'm curious if our viewers want to learn more, they want to follow you on social media or that sort of thing. Where can they learn more and find out about your brand?
All socials, East Coast Kellys, all one word. Just give us a search. You'll find us.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you for being here. We'll look forward to catching you sometime soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. If you want to be on the show or you know someone who should, head over to the2448.com and submit your business. Don't forget to follow and subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If you thought it was 4 stars, still give us 5 stars or I will find you. See you next time. Later.